Now, what I'm about to share with you in this video, if you're on your last $100, this is the ultimate guide to buying sports cards on a budget. And I have 4 steps I'm going to go through on how to buy sports cards properly on a budget. Start small and see it work. So if you go to my screen here, hi, my name is Eric Michael. I've sold over $5 million in sports cards. Been doing this stuff for the past 10 years, and I make these videos to help people get into the world of sports cards, change my life. I know it could change a lot of people's lives with videos like this. So let's get into it. So why are sports cards an amazing investment, especially if you want to start small and see it work? Okay. Now, what I'm about to share with you in this video, if you're on your last $100, probably get off this video. Don't do it. It's going to be a waste of your time. But if you're someone that wants to start on a budget and work your way up and see something work, this is how to do it. And I have 4 steps I'm going to go through on how to buy sports cards properly on a budget, start small and see it work. So if you go to my screen here, you'll see this card of CJ Stroud, right? And in sports cards, there's something called grading. Some of you guys may have heard this term before, but if you look here, right, so if you look right here, the last sale of this card was $45. And this card graded a 10 is $164, and graded a 9 is $49. This is why this fundamental concept is why sports cards are an amazing investment at its core, right? Because what you can do is buy a card for, let's say, $50, right? And if it grades a 10, it'll be worth, let's say, $150. And if it grades a 9, and PSA is the name of the grading company if you don't know what PSA means, if it grades a 9, let's say it's worth $60. And how much does it cost to get a card graded? Grading cost, it'll be roughly $20. So this simple concept is why it's great to start small and you could see it work because it's very low risk. If this card grades a 9 in this situation, after fees and stuff, you'll lose about, $10 to $20. If the card grades a 10, you'll make about, $80 to $100, okay? And if you know what you're doing, or just follow these videos I put out here for free, or if you properly look at a card and know how to evaluate the corners, the edges, the centering, the surface, all that stuff, you could grade a 10, right? Grade a 10 about 60 to 70% of the time, right? So in other words, 60 to 70% of the time you're making 80 to 100, and then the other times you're losing about $10 to $20. That's a good bet, right? And that is why sports cards, you could actually start small and see it work, as opposed to other businesses like e-commerce or real estate. You can't really start small. It just takes a lot of upfront capital, and that's it. But you could buy a few cards, see the concept work, and then go from there, okay? So that's the first thing. That's how grading works and why you could do this on a budget. And I wouldn't say sports cards is an investment, right? So you can look at sports cards in 2 different ways, either as an investment or as a way to make an income every single month. So I've used sports cards to make an income every single month. I flip these cards, buy them, grade them, sell them. When you use the word investment, right, usually you're thinking about something, holding something long term, like buying a vintage Mickey Mantle card and just holding it for the long term. That's not what I'm teaching here. That's not what I'm doing. I'm teaching a way to make an extra few $1,000s a month, so this is extra cash you could add to your bank account, so you could, cover your mortgage payment or pay for your kids' college tuition or whatever your goal might be. Okay, so that's number 1, right? That's kind of grading why sports cards are an investment. Number 2, so how do we actually find the right cards? Okay, so to break this down simply, right, there are really 3 main platforms to find cards on, right? The biggest one is, that doesn't look good, eBay. The next one is social media. And the other one would be card shows, okay? These are like the 3 main ways to find cards, all right? Now, eBay, in my opinion, so I kind of label these in order. So this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3 in terms of buying cards, okay? And then some pros with eBay, right? So you can filter very easily, right? You could search for specific cards, like cards of CJ Stroud or cards of, Connor Bedard or whoever, right? And then there's thousands of cards, uploaded This is not my best handwriting, but every day. Okay, so these are some pros of eBay. It's just very easy to go on there, and also you cannot get scammed, right? Because God forbid you buy something and someone is trying to scam you, eBay will just give you your money back every single time. Okay, so those are some of the pros about eBay. eBay is where I've bought the most amount of cards. Now, social media. So pros, so you can't filter. It's a little bit harder to find cards, but the biggest pro of social media is you're able to build connections, right? When you do a deal with someone, now you have their Facebook profile, or hopefully you get their phone number. And if you do a deal with someone once, well, you could do it probably more times, right? Because if you bought one card from them, they're probably getting more cards you want in the future, right? And then usually you can get cheaper prices. And the reason for this is because when you're buying a card on eBay, a seller has to incur about a 13% fee, okay? On social media, if you just Zelle them or Venmo them or pay them through PayPal Goods and Services, where they only take a 3% fee, the seller's not eating as big of a fee. So usually you'll get better pricing, okay? In card shows, so eBay is funny. eBay is probably the place where I've bought the most amount of cards and it's the most profitable. But card shows are actually my favorite, to be honest, because it's just like the most fun actually doing it in person. And the most important one about card shows is pace and connections. So honestly, pace, connections, and cheaper prices. So right, when you buy a card at a card show, well, you can't get scammed. You can just give them cash, and usually people are going to give you better deals for cash. Number two, you could literally just build a connection right there and then, right? You actually meet someone, get their phone number, and you could do more deals with them in the future. And also you have rapport built up, so you trust that person. When you pay them in the future, you could pay them through Venmo or Zelle, and they're not going to incur any fees, and it's seamless to do the transaction. But the biggest one and the most important one is right here, pace. So you can go to a card show and literally buy 10 cards within a 45-minute period just because the cards are right there and the deals are just so easy to do. It's just like, hey, what do you want for this card? Boom, 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 back and forth, you do the deal. As opposed to eBay, right? You make an offer, it takes them 6 hours to respond, then you're sleeping and you wake up and you go to work. Now you're not responding until 5 o'clock, so it's a lot slower, eBay and social media. Card shows, the pace at which you do deals, I mean, I went into card shows and just spent a ton of money within like 20 minutes. It's insane. The downside to it is you actually have to travel and get up. Now, some people don't want to do that. I enjoy not really traveling, but I enjoy being at card shows and talking to people and actually doing this stuff live. It's just so much more fun. You would understand if you did it, trust me. And also, when you know what you're doing and you're making money, it's like you're going, you're traveling, you're meeting new people, you're eating great food, and you're making good money. Because a lot of these big card shows, they're in usually pretty good cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, Miami, Las Vegas. So that's how to find cards. And going back to this whole concept of the video, buying cards on a budget, there's tons of cards at these shows that are $20, $30, $40, $50, just like this CJ Stroud I showed you up here that you can buy and grade. Because a lot of these dealers at card shows, they're kind of too lazy to get the smaller cards graded. And you could actually see the card in person and evaluate the condition before sending it in for grading. Okay? And now when you send cards in for grading, now this is the third step to buying cards on a budget here, right? There's 3 main grading companies, right? There's 3 main ones you're going to use, PSA, and then we have SGC, then we have Beckett. I mean, there's other grading companies, but these are the main ones. You're really just going to be using PSA for the most part, but SGC is not bad. Beckett for buying smaller cards on a budget, I'm going to cross this out because you're never really going to do it. Beckett is better used, in my opinion, at least where I've had the most success, is with higher end cards. Is Beckett kind of fell off in the past few years, and I really only use them if I have to because they're a little bit more lenient, so sometimes it's easier to get more expensive cards to pass as Beckett 9.5. But PSA is going to be your bread and butter here. Now, the downside, so I'll put an arrow. The downside here is turnaround times are long. Okay, so that's the downside. But the upside, the pro here, is bigger margins. So when you buy a card, you could a lot of the times triple your money with PSA. Now, SGC, the upside here are turnaround times. So SGC will get your cards back very, very fast. And then the downside here are the margins. So like, for example, when you send a card to SGC, you want to get an SGC 10. When you send a card to PSA, the goal if you're sending a modern card is to get an PSA 10. A PSA 10 is usually going to outsell an SGC 10 by 20, 30, 40%. So because of that, you have smaller margins with SGC, but you're getting these cards back faster. So if you're really tight on a budget, common sense, you might say to yourself, well, I'm going to send my cards to PSA because, right, I can make more money because the margins are bigger. But there's something in life called opportunity cost. And essentially what you have to ask yourself is, okay, I could send this card to SGC and make $200 on it in a week, or I could send it to PSA and make $300 on it, but it's going to take a month, right? Money is more valuable to you. Money is more valuable today than it is in the future. So if you're more on a budget and you want to see this work quicker and you lack patience like me, SGC might be your route. Because I'd rather make $200 in a week than $300 in a month, right? Because I could take that $200 and repeat that process over again before these cards ever get back from PSA. But those are the three main grading companies. Becky, you're not really going to be using for what I'm talking about here. But PSA and SGC, that's the downside. That's the upside. And the last part is selling. So, right, you get these cards back from grading, and now you're selling them. And you're selling these cards. And just to lay out the scenario here, right? So let's say, right, you buy a card here for $50, right? And then step 2, you grade the card, right? Step 3, now this card, let's say, is a PSA 10, and let's pretend now it's worth $200. Yip-de-doo. Now, what people do is they try and sell this card for $200. Now, what you should do, right? Discount it by 10%. Why? It's going to sell much faster and you're going to be able to build connections, okay? And, right, going back to what I was just talking about before with opportunity cost, would you rather wait a month to sell this card for $200 or sell it today for $170? You'd rather sell it today for $170 because you could take that money and repeat the same process over again, okay? So don't be that person that wants every last penny. You're actually costing yourself money. And then on top of this, so on top of all this, so these are like the 4 big things you have to know when it comes to buying cards on a budget, right? We have just understanding the grading concept and why sports cards is amazing to do on a budget, right? And then number 2, right, finding cards. And then, number 3, understanding what grading companies. And then number 4, selling. But what I would say about this, so you do things correctly, is like the biggest thing hovering over all of this, finding cards, buying them, grading them, selling them, etc., is something called timing, okay? So this is where everybody fucks up. So basically the way sports cards works is you want to buy low, sell high, right? I would hope so, right? So for example, like football, right? Football is high, right, in like August, and it is low in the off season in like March, right? So what you want to be doing is buying in March and then selling in August, because when the football season starts, most guys go down in value because they're hyped in August, right? They're hyped here, and when things are hyped, they tend to go down. The same thing for basketball, right? The basketball season starts October, right? So you want to be able to buy basketball cards in like June-ish, and then sell them in September. Same thing with baseball. Buy it through the holidays, November, December. Sell it in February, March, and spring training. So you want to be buying these cards, getting them graded, and timing the market so you can get it back while it's at its peak, right? Buying a baseball card in March and getting it back in, June, a lot of the times that card is going to be worth a lot less. Even if the card grades a 10, you're not going to be able to make money, all right? So you need to understand timing. I have a bunch of other videos on it, but simply put, That's how it works. But that's how to buy cards really on a budget. That's how it works, and it works really well because there's this thing in sports cards called grading, and grading cards is a super cool thing to do, and it's just a way where you could really have minimal risk and maximum returns as long as you understand what you're doing. But hopefully you enjoyed this stuff. If you have any questions, let me know below in the YouTube comments. I always like to reply to the questions. Either I'll comment back, or I do a weekly podcast where I go over all the questions I get, through our website or through the comments on YouTube or Instagram. Hopefully you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.